Good evening and welcome to our webinar on NAPIT Wealth. My name is Steve Watton and I'm the Scheme Manager here at NAPIT. With me tonight is David Cook, who's an Independent Financial Advisor at NAPIT Wealth. He will take you through the presentation. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to use the Ask a Question function, which is in your control panel, and for most of you this will be to the right of your screen. We'll then do our very best to get through as many of these as we can at the end. You'll also find a copy of the presentation and a certificate of attendance in the handout section in the control panel, which you can download for your records. We'll leave a few minutes at the end of the session if you want to open that and save it. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We really welcome your feedback to make these webinars as useful as possible going forward. So I'll pass you through to David to get things started.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our auto-enrolment webinar. My name is David Cook, and I'm here tonight to provide some insight into auto-enrolment. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a slide presentation, and we will follow that with a question and answer session. So just talking about auto-enrolment, how did it start and how did it all come to come into play? In 2006, the government published a white paper, Security in Retirement, with plans to reform and to provide a new pension system called auto-enrolment. This resulted in the legislation of auto-enrolment in the Pension Act of 2008, which was a major reform. And on the 1st of October 2012, auto-enrolment commenced. And the size of the problem was that to date, there's 7 million people currently not contributing to a pension plan. So what is auto-enrolment? It's new legislation which employers must, and I stress this, it's part of the law, so employers must enroll eligible employees into a pension scheme without the need for application. The employer and the employee must contribute unless the employee opts out of their own accord from the pension plan. So why has auto-enrolment been introduced? What's been happening? Well, we all know people are living longer. On average, men will live to age 83 and women will live to age 86 years old. The ratio of workers to retirees is falling. This is putting more pressure on the state benefit system. And in general, people are not saving enough for retirement. Auto-enrolment has come over from Australia, started there in 1992. And so Australia are quite ahead of us in this. With auto-enrolment, you have three choices. The first one is to do nothing. The second one is to do it yourself. The third one is speak to a NAPIT auto-enrolment specialist. If you go down the do nothing route, you face the risk of failing to comply, and there are fines. There's an immediate fine of £400. There's a daily fine on top of that, from £10,000 per day to £50 per day, depending on the number of employees. Obviously, the bigger employers with hundreds, thousands of employees were the ones that were subject to the £10,000 per day fines. But it's a warning sign for smaller employers. The £50 per day, you know, it can come into play if you haven't complied. And willful non-compliance can lead to further criminal prosecution. So this is a serious matter. It's part of the law. If you choose to do it yourself, you can look at detailed auto-enrolment guidance for employers consisting of 561 pages. And this excludes the updates, the policy and strategy papers, and the multitude of document templates. It's not easy to understand all this. It's difficult to interpret in parts without assistance. And in total, there's 33 new mandatory pension responsibilities. We'll have a quick look at these. As you can see there, employers' responsibilities. I'm not going to go into these in details, but there's 33 set out there. And that gives you a sense, a scale of the problem if you're going to tackle this yourself. The third option is speak to us at NAPIT Wealth. We're auto-enrolment specialists. And we can help you. We want to relieve the huge burden placed on your business. The key thing about auto-enrolment is the staging date, and this is the date that employer duties first apply. The employer duties started being introduced in stages from October 2012, and this is for the larger companies like your Asda's and so on. The start date is based on number of people you employ. The largest pay-as-you-earn employers as of the 1st of April started at the beginning. This was followed on over the last few years by medium-sized companies and then smaller companies. So the auto-enrolment staging date is key. Any changes to the size of the workforce after the 1st of April 2012 won't affect the staging date. The pension regulator will tell you 12 months in advance of your own staging date. You can choose to bring that staging date forward to coincide with other key company dates, such as your end of year accounting. There's a list of available dates provided by the pensions regulator. There are 5 main phases to auto-enrolment. The first one is to assess your own workforce. The second one is to ensure you communicate with your employees. The third one is the data management, the paying the contributions and the answering the employee questions. The fourth one is to choose a pension scheme and make sure that scheme's got a default fund. This is a fund that the employees will be put into in terms of investing their pension monies. The fifth one is crucial. It's the record keeping and the ongoing compliance. Phase 1 is assessing the workforce. There are 3 types of employee categories: eligible job holders, non-eligible job holders, entitled workers. Eligible job holders. These people will be between age 22 to state pension age. They're earning above £10,000, and if they fit into this category, they must be auto-enrolled with employer contributions. The next category is the non-eligible job holders. These are people aged between 16 to 21 or from state pension age to age 74 with earnings above £10,000, or age 16 to 74 with earnings above £5,876 but below £10,000. These individuals have the right to opt in to the auto-enrolment scheme, and if they do so, then the employer is duty bound to pay any contribution in for them also. Entitled workers are aged between 16 to 74, and they will be earning below £5,876. They still have a right to join the scheme, but the employer is not required to make a contribution. They can do so if they want to, but there's not a legal requirement to contribute for these employees. Phase 2, communication, part 1. The employer must produce and send out appropriate communications. This must be direct communication, a letter, an email, by a payslip, or by a web portal. There's a deadline for communication, 2 months after staging date for existing scheme members, or 6 weeks after enrolment for workers who are not already in a qualifying pension scheme. There's an ongoing requirement to communicate. So this is ongoing when workers join or change categories within the scheme. Phase 2, communication, part 2. Employers must inform staff of the right to opt out and how to opt out. However, employers must not send out opt-out notices. Employers need to be very careful here. You watch out for the coercion rules. It's a difficult one, but the employer must not be seen to be trying to get people not to join the scheme. There's a requirement to re-enroll individuals every 3 years. Non-eligible job holders can opt in at any time, and entitled workers can request to join the scheme. Phase 3 is the data management, and there's two aspects to this. Data management, part 1. The employer must take required data from the payroll. The employer must use middleware IT to run pension auto-enrolment duties. The employer must handle opt-ins and opt-out requests and deduct pension contributions. And there must be some payroll integration between the employer with the relevant pension provider who's providing the scheme. Part 2 of the data management is answering employee questions. Employees will have queries. I've been up and down the country doing these sorts of things, and employees always have questions, particularly when it comes to contributions coming out of their own pay. It's important for them to understand. So you have to decide the process for response. As an employer, you usually want someone who's independent from yourself to answer these questions. You must be careful to provide guidance-only care. You must keep a record of the discussions that have been had with the employees. As I said, ideally, you want somebody else doing it that's independent for you. And remember, companies cannot get involved in any opt-out discussions. Phase 4, choosing a scheme, part 1. You have to choose the contribution basis upon which the employees are going to contribute. You have to review any existing arrangements in place. You may already have a scheme. Does that qualify for auto-enrolment? A totally new scheme may be required, a qualifying scheme. You have to look at the options in the marketplace. The insurance companies that provide these schemes, Nest, some of the other pension providers, People's Pension, there's quite a lot out there. A combination of pension schemes may be needed. You must ensure there's a default investment fund, so when the employees and the employer make a contribution, the fund is there. The monies will be invested in a fund on behalf of the individual. Are you comfortable taking these decisions yourself on behalf of your employees? That's a question, obviously, you need to ask yourselves. Okay, phase 4, choose a scheme, part 2. There are 4 choices regarding contributions. The default choice is qualifying earnings. This is the minimal total contribution to the scheme, and this is usually based on qualifying earnings. These are your earnings from employment before income tax and national insurance contributions deducted that fall between the lower and upper earnings limit that are set by the government. We'll come on and see that, how that pans out now in a minute. The other 3 options are based on using pension pay. Typically, pension pay is basic salary, not including elements of earnings such as commission, bonuses, and overtime. We won't go on to these other contribution bases in too much detail. I think if we focus on the qualifying earnings, which we'll come on to now in a minute, I think that'll be useful for you to understand how that works. So we're going to come on to that now. Qualifying earnings. This is earnings between lower and upper threshold. In the current tax year, 2017 to 2018, this is earnings between £5,876 and £45,000. So, as an employer, you only have to provide contributions on earnings between these 2 parameters. Auto-enrolment is phased in. So in the first year, before 5th of April 2018, the employer must make a contribution of 1%. The employee is duty bound to contribute 0.8%. There's an element of tax added in, which is 0.2%, and together this totals 2%. Between 2018 and 2019, we can see this is scaled up. The employer has to contribute 2%, the employee 2.4%, the tax element added in 0.6, giving a total of 5%. The following year, from April 2019 onwards, the employer is duty bound to contribute 3%. The employee contributes 4%, and the element of tax 1% gives a total of 8%. An agreement must be in place for job holders to make up at least any difference between total and the employer's amount. I just want to stop and talk about that 8% target there. That's something the government has in place. A lot of research has been done, and the government thinks that 8% of earnings over a number of years, a lot of years, will be necessary to provide a reasonable pot at retirement. I just want to talk about that 8% pot, because if you contrast private schemes, such as auto-enrolment, with the public sector schemes, your civil servants, local government employees, normally the contributions for them will be in the area of 16% of total salary. So you can kind of see what the government is trying to is up against here in terms of getting people to contribute. The auto-enrolment piece is designed to get people paying 8%. In contrast, public sector schemes, normally employees together with their employer are contributing at levels of 16% a year. Okay. Okay, phase 5 is record keeping. This is so important. You can use electronic or paper filing system to keep or store any records. However, in this day and age, these should be electronic, and there's a requirement that records must be kept for 6 years. Employer must keep those records. It's absolutely crucial. As I said, paper records are not really practical in this day and age. Perhaps you need to try and keep electronic records. The records must be kept. They must be provided to the pension regulator if requested. The pension regulator can conduct an audit if they have reasonable grounds to do so. So if there's a whistleblower, they might report the situation to the pensions regulator, and that could be a problem if the records are not intact. At the end of the day, the employer must complete a declaration of compliance. So once you've enrolled your staff, you must complete your declaration of compliance that confirms to the pension regulator that you have complied with your duties. This must be done within 5 months from your staging date. This is a legal duty. If you fail to complete it within 5 months, you could be fined. And we talked about some of those fines earlier on in the slide presentation. NAPIT Wealth is here to help. We can guide you through all aspects of the auto-enrolment journey that every employer now has to take. Our dedicated team will make sure everything will run as smoothly as possible. We offer annual reviews and are able to give independent financial advice from across the whole of the market. Okay, that's the end of the presentation. I hope you found that useful, and we now look forward to receiving any questions. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. Got a few questions. Okay, so if I have another pension plan, can you give me advice on whether we should include it in the auto-enrolment scheme or not?
That's a very good question, because the auto-enrolment scheme might not necessarily be the answer in terms of transferring your existing plan into the new auto-enrolment scheme. That would require independent financial advice. Sometimes an old pension scheme may well be worth hanging on to. So it's not always necessarily the case that just to consolidate the plans would be the best way to go forward. It might be well worth hanging on to the old scheme and at the same time carrying on with the auto-enrolment scheme. So my suggestion would be take independent financial advice at the time.
Excellent. Okay, and another one. What happens if I pass away with the auto-enrolment pension scheme?
The auto-enrolment scheme will provide death benefits. So you'll be able to leave those for your family or your dependents, or in fact, you can nominate any beneficiary you want to in this day and age. So if you built up a pension pot, you can be rest assured that on death, at least it'll be going back to the people that you wanted to, and they will have the benefit of the pot that you built up.
Excellent. Okay, and the final one, what is the earliest I can access the scheme after I begin contributing?
That's a great question. The earliest you can now access private pensions, like the auto-enrolment scheme, is age 55. This has gone up in recent years from age 50. So this gives an indication, again, of where the government is heading, and where we're all heading, in fact, in terms of retirement, in a sense that we're all going to be, unfortunately, retiring a little bit later, I suspect. So the earliest age you can get at your pension benefits is age 55.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, thank you very much. That's the end of the questions. Okay, so thank you all for joining us this evening. If you've got any more questions, don't forget you can give NAPIT Wealth a call on 0345 241 6600 or email info@napitwealth.co.uk. We will make a recording to tonight's webinar available tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel, and we'll leave the webinar running for a few minutes to allow you time to download the certificate from the handout section. If you could please fill in the survey once the webinar closes, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Future webinars will be announced on the online forum, over social media and via email also, so keep an eye out for that. Once again, thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.
Right.